back to Doomsday Happy Hour. I'm your host, DJ Peters. Circling back to last week's episode, I wanted to continue the discussion about whether or not celebs are just like us. Item 1. They feed the meters. Yeah, they do. Tessa Thompson does. Rumor Willis does. So does Scout Willis. Vanessa Hudgens does. Okay. But let me ask you this. How else are they going to play carpool karaoke with James Corden? I mean, somebody's got to drive, which means somebody has to park. Am I right? Item number 2. Back in mid-February, Kristen Chenoweth went shopping at Kittenish. They called it retail therapy. Remember, this is before coronavirus hits, before we all need therapy, retail or otherwise. Shoe shopping. Take a look at those things. Can you see the heels? Now, on the one hand, I know she's short, so stiletto type heels really do make sense. I get it. But on the other hand, the magnitude of those things makes me think we don't see eye to eye about part of the purpose of shoes being to facilitate actually walking. Otherwise, she's much more adept at walking than I am. Anyway, the other day, we put my daughter in shoes for the first time. Flats, mind you. And she thought, what are you doing to me? These things are not helping me walk. I can't move. It was like when you put a dog in snow booties, the dog just stares at you. Legs splayed, like it can't move. But she was okay because she had her ball with her. So she could go up or down or front and back, but she was okay. She had her ball. Until after 10 minutes, she started to get a little bit tired just standing there holding her ball. She doesn't know she could move. So she starts crying. She needs to be rescued. It was hilarious. Folks, I'm telling you, this is why people have kids. It's all about the entertainment value. Oh, here's a fun one. What do Blake Shelton, Brie Larson, and Amy Poehler all have in common? I know. They go grocery shopping. Yeah, seriously. Because they have to eat, at least sometimes. Although I'm not entirely convinced that some celebs wouldn't pay people to chew their food for them if they could. I mean, it might save them money on lipo and plastic surgeries. But my absolute favorite, truly the best, is a 2019 pic of Hugh Jackman on the beach in Sydney, Australia. I don't know if you can read, but the caption goes, "They take showers?" Exclamation point. Now, admittedly, Wolverine is pretty easy on the eyes, particularly in beach attire. But that's not the beauty of this. Not at all. It's the excitement about the fact that celebrities take showers. What was their alternative? Not showering? Maybe also not brushing their teeth? I'm pretty sure they want to continue to get roles, and that there's very likely an inverse relationship between the number of showers you skip and how many people are going to be willing to walk into the same room as you or onto a movie set with you, especially in the summer. So I'm not sure that this proves much at all.
Welcome, Jill Yanofsky. Thank you for joining me today.
Thank you very much.
So I'm really glad you could join us because I thought you could give the audience a very different perspective. A lot of the people who've come on the show so far have been entrepreneurs, one freelancer, and the couple of people who've been employees to date. One of the two of them, is a firefighter, and I understand that qualifying to be a firefighter involves testing, written testing and physical testing. A lot of people may not want to start their own thing and may want to be an employee, first of all. And you had, first of all, a business that was focused on recruiting. So you help people with their resumes, you help them put their best foot forward in terms of interviewing. So you know all about that and can give plenty of advice about that. And also you yourself have made the move from small business owner to employee. And you went into sales and have been a record breaker in that area. And you've actually switched careers multiple times. You went from finance to, I think, financial services focused recruiting to now sales. And so I thought that for people who are looking to be employees, both from your time as a recruiter when you were a small business owner, but helped other people get jobs, and then becoming an employee, you would have a lot to add. So first of all, can you tell us a little bit about your background and trajectory?
Absolutely. So thank you. That's a really great introduction. I will tell you a little bit about myself. I graduated Syracuse University with a degree in acting and sociology. And basically, I had no idea what I was going to do with my life. After school, I worked for a nonprofit, and for 2 years, while I was in school, someone mentioned sales, and I thought sales was working at the department store. So I said, no way. And then I went into nonprofit and loved it, but made, honestly, $18,000 for my first 2 years. So nothing, but spent that time figuring out what I was going to do. So during that, I did become interested in financial services. And still knowing nothing, I took a job at Fidelity as a financial analyst. So it got me a little bit exposed to financial services. And I became more and more interested in sales. I was just about ready to make that jump into sales. And of course, 9/11 happened. So financial services was pretty dead. However, the one industry the one part of sales that was hiring were financial advisors. So I got my Series 7 and 66, and I was doing what they told me, but I was using my acting and sociology skills. So I was able, to act like a financial advisor, and people were trusting me with $1 million portfolios. I'm not sure why. I couldn't sleep at night. I got the most amazing training from UBS Payne Weber, and then later Citibank Smith Barney. So they taught me about sales. They put us through these intensive programs where we had to go away for, I think, 6 weeks. And when I came out, I was able to be a financial advisor. I was managing these portfolios, and I wasn't sleeping at night because I knew nothing about finance. I only knew how to sell people on buying, this portfolio or that portfolio manager, and they were trusting me. I wanted to stay in financial services, but needed to do something else. And that is the thing I came up with was after tons and tons of interviews was recruiting. Why not try to be a recruiter? So I learned about the recruiting industry by actually interviewing at maybe 25 different recruiting agencies. Wow. So knowing nothing about recruiting, I was a sponge. I would go to each recruiting agency in these in-person interviews, and I would ask them questions, and I learned about recruiting, and I finally was chosen by, but also chose one that I thought was fantastic. And yes, part of our job was to help with resumes and to help people with interviews, but it was because we were selling the candidate. So I had to make the candidate profitable. I had to sell the candidate to my client, but I was making commission off of recruiting, which is much different than if I was an HR recruiter internally hired by a company to find candidates.
Right.
So my job as a third-party recruiter was specifically to sell. So going back, I was using all of my sales training from UBS Payne Weber and Smith Barney, and I used my sales training from acting because I always had to sell myself, and I used my sociology skills because I had to understand groups and people and how to fit people at specific companies. And lo and behold, I became a recruiter, but I was really good, and I was doing a lot on my own. And about 6 months into it, the woman who hired me left, and I didn't have an experienced manager. So I was on my own, and somehow I reached out to a connection of mine who was also a recruiter, and he said, look, Jill, I just started my own network of recruiters. Why don't you just leave and join me? You can have your own business, but we're a consortium. So you can use our resources and you can use our recruiters, and, you know, you can do splits, and if you have a great candidate, you can, you know, work with one of our customers, and vice versa. If you have a customer, we might be able to help you find a candidate. So I was able to start my business under the auspices of this consortium, and it was awesome for 3 years. But I had focused on financial services where others had realized, you know, IT was the place to go, and I knew nothing about IT, so I focused on financial services. So when the market crashed in 2009, I was in trouble. My clients went out of business. I knew how to sell and I knew how to recruit, but that was it. And I couldn't, you know, I couldn't pay the bills. So I said, you know what, I better start selling myself and figuring out, you know, other things. And these IT recruiters are doing great. Maybe I should learn a little bit about IT. So in my interviewing, and I met with sales recruiters, and I was trying to, you know, ask them, well, this is
So
what
were
I
you
want
trying
to
to
do.
actually pivot into recruiting for IT, or were you trying to pivot into an employee role at an IT company?
You know, at that point, I wanted to work for a company, and I only had financial services recruiting experience. So an IT no one would hire me as what's called an HR internal recruiter, because
Right.
I had no IT experience and I had no idea what I was doing. So the best sales job I was able to get at that time, and it was the luckiest break, was a company called By Appointment Only. And my only job was to set appointments for executive sales professionals. So I was working with IT. I didn't have to, the awesome thing was I didn't have to know anything about IT. All I had to be able to do was sell an appointment. So an expert IT sales person could come in and do the sale.
Right.
So I was setting, and I had fun doing it. I loved cold calling. At that time, we didn't even have automatic dialing. I was making, I think, 180 to 220 calls a day, dials.
Wow.
And I was speaking to at least 50 to 75 people, and I was setting between, well, I started probably setting, you know, 1 to 3 appointments a day, and then I was able to sell 3 to 5. And part of what I was trained to do is make sure these appointments happened. So I was able to get back into corporate America, go into an office, get my health insurance, dental insurance, 401k, and do something that, to me, I made it fun, but it was relatively easy than selling a candidate or selling a product from soup to nuts. That prepared me because I learned about IT because I was selling appointments for the largest with the largest IT companies like SAP.
Did you
like
sit in on the meetings when somebody else sold?
No.
So you could understand more?
At this time, I didn't. But I talked, the sales professionals would talk to me and tell me why a meeting was good or why a meeting was bad.
Okay.
I had to study up. So we would have 20, when we were given, I was actually working with 3 to 5 technologies and maybe 5 to 7 sales reps. So I had about 24 hours to learn a campaign. So I had 24 hours to learn what SAP's all-in-one product did. Enough that I could set a meeting for a sales executive.
If I understand correctly, what you did was you sold the person on the chance to have a conversation with somebody who would then sell the product fully, ideally.
Exactly. And it's called business development rep, sales development rep, account development rep. But it truly prepared me, not only to learn about IT, but it truly prepared me to learn about sales so that I can be successful in any, in any organization as a sales professional.
Got it.
From there, I was hired by a startup doing a similar position. I went to a few startups from there, and then I needed to get out of the startup world. So again, I went back to my inside sales experience, and I was able to land an awesome account executive position at Intuit. And then they were sold twice. And so I was there over 5 years before the pandemic started. And now I am, reevaluating my career again and trying to figure out how to balance this, wonderful thing called family and career.
Thank you. I think that there's a lot of insight to be gleaned from your description of your trajectory. So I think you mentioned when we spoke over the phone, and I think you've alluded to it here, you quickly assessed when the recession hit that you were absolutely not in a recession-proof industry, and that there were other areas, in particular tech, that were going to be doing better. What made you decide that becoming an employee, first of all, was and doing sales for somebody else, some larger organization in the tech space, was the route to go, instead of trying to pivot, retain your own place and pivot into a tech-focused recruiting agency?
I only had 9 to 12 months experience, and then I was on my own for 3 years. So even though I was recruiting for about 4 years, I was still considered a green recruiter.
Right.
And I only had the experience in financial services, and recruiting is somewhat specific. I wasn't smart enough while I was doing financial services. I wish I was smart enough to also do some IT. And this way, because I hadn't been smart enough, I had to start 100% from scratch for an industry I just didn't know well enough to recruit on my own in IT.
Okay.
So I could have gone to a recruiting firm to do IT, maybe, but I wasn't a competitive hire.
So now, for those in our audience who, again, are looking for employee positions and potentially in the same general industry that they've been in to date, or maybe their first position, out of school, do you have a few top tips, first on the resume side, and a few top tips on the interview side that you can share based on your years of recruiting?
Sure. And so resume interview for both, I would say, if you can, hire some type of professional coach, because recruiters are paid by companies. They're looking for someone who has a polished resume. They're looking for someone who has a polished interview. Yes, they're going to coach you to get that job once you get the interview. And yes, they're going to look at your resume and give you a few suggestions, but it's not the same as someone working for you. Invest in social media. I think, yes, everyone's doing Facebook and Instagram, and stay on those and stay professional, but you really need to build a network on LinkedIn. And it's not about your resume. It's not about, my profile is, I'm looking for a job. It's about promoting yourself. I think my profile says I'm an award-winning sales professional.
Yes.
Wouldn't you want to hire an award-winning sales professional as opposed to, sales professional looking for a new career? And you also, have to think about your LinkedIn. So you want to cater to customers as opposed so it does get tricky, because you always should be looking whether you have a job or not. But the more you're focused on the people you're selling to, or whoever your customers are, the more likely someone is going to want to hire you. So in that, I would also say, read as much as possible. Read articles on, I love reading articles on LinkedIn. There's classes on LinkedIn, but get involved. So, make comments, if you're a sales professional, make comments on the best sales trainers, on his, whatever he or she is posting, because
Right.
other people will see that and want to know more about you. So definitely LinkedIn and knowing how to interview. I'm sure there's even free courses online to teach you how to interview. Treat a career change, like education. Learn,
Right. That's a great point.
Resumes even 3 years ago were much different than how they are today. So how you might have promoted yourself in your last job is completely different, especially if you're a career changer. You want to make sure you're focusing on the career you love, the career you want to go into,
Right.
and showing the experience you have and what you can give. It might be harder to present it on a resume, but you might be able to present yourself fantastically on LinkedIn. Always look to improve yourself and take classes, and learn new interview techniques. And there's a million free resources out there. I'm in a million groups on Facebook, but join a career group, network, network virtually. It's not that hard to find a job, but you do need to focus, and you do need to talk to people, be it on the phone, in person, over coffee, or virtually, or even just texting. But you need to communicate with people to learn about the career, and you want to make people interested in you.
Yes. I like that last point a lot, making them interested in you, because I think that's very insightful. And they feel that they're getting something out of it too. Now, one interesting thing you mentioned the other day, and I think you've kind of hinted at it a little bit already, is that thanks in part to COVID-19, your plate is overflowing, but you actually do have hiring managers knocking on your door. You told me the other day that somebody wanted to interview you for a position, and they said that they understood if you couldn't join till the fall. Yes. And usually, as you said, like when you're a recruiter, you're trying to sell a person to the company so they get the interview, and then you're trying to help them sell themselves so that they, get the offer, right? But you're selling the candidate. In this case, you're just sitting back, and these people are basically coming and knocking on your door and saying, we want to hire you. We know, to your point about, mentioning the fact that you're an award-winning salesperson. We know you are excellent, and we need you, we want you, and we're even willing to wait for you to join us. How did you set yourself up for that kind of attention, positive attention?
I think that's exactly what I was doing. Yes. So it didn't happen overnight. Though it could, with hard work or staying up for a full night. I have over 11,000 LinkedIn connections, which actually sounds like a lot, but I have friends and colleagues that have, I think, 100,000. I'm exaggerating a little bit, because I think the limit, since Microsoft bought LinkedIn, I think there's limits. So I can't remember the exact number, but I have always worked. Some people believe in only connecting with people they know. I believe in connecting with anyone in the industry, or in my industry, an industry I want to sell to, or an industry I want to join.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense.
And since I've been selling to every industry, I have connections in every industry. I do advise being more specific than I have been. While I'm exploring, I'm kind of leaving, I'm going to say, a generic LinkedIn as I focus on my family and figure out, what I'm going to do next. And I do think, on that topic, I'm reading, there's a lot of career changers now. So I think now is a fantastic time to change careers, to explore careers. I think there is a ton of opportunity out there, which I know is against probably everything. Unemployment is very high right now.
Yes.
which sounds like there wouldn't be any jobs, but I think the opportunity is enormous if
Right.
you can, dig down and figure out what you want to do, focus on what you want to do, and find some of the leaders in the industry you want to be in.
Right. Great.
So
That's great
follow,
advice.
I was gonna say, follow them on LinkedIn, read blogs, and post articles. The more you're out and you try to help people, the more people will be interested in you.
Wonderful. That's great advice. Jill, thank you so much for joining us. I really appreciate it.
You are very welcome. Thank you very much for having me. I truly appreciate the opportunity.